like to bring to order the special joint meeting of the Energy and Environment and Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. Today is February 18th, 2015, and I would like to welcome all of you to this special meeting. I want to begin by thanking you, Mr. Chair Buscaino, for your willingness to do this joint meeting and to move forward on what I hope is going to be a very good policy filter for how it is that we make our capital expenditures in the city of Los Angeles. And truthfully, your leadership on all of this has been tremendous. We have had, I think, a really very vigorous conversation in Los Angeles about our infrastructure, and it's in no short part to all of the leadership that you and your committee have expressed. So I'm very grateful for that, and I hope that we can have a very good conversation on some of the ideas that will be presented here today. It looks like we have a full deck, just about. The joke is just coming. That's right. It's a whole picnic here. We're not short. We've got. We're short on one. Mr. Weezer, I do not believe is going to be in attendance, but we're pretty close to a full deck. Mr. Buscaino, did you want to say anything before we take any of these items?
Well, I too want to thank you, Mr. Fuentes, for your leadership on this issue. A very thoughtful proposal that you have before us. It's amazing. We see a number of motions that come before us, but a motion with a flow chart is very impressive here within City Hall. So the framework that you've developed we're just looking forward to working with our public work bureaus and your committee collectively, and recognizing that our streets cover 13% of the total land in LA, and it serves as our primary stormwater collection device is impressive in itself. So we're looking forward to moving forward on policy that recognizes that reality and will require street reconstruction projects to include stormwater best management practices. And the work that, as you mentioned, I can't, we have to recognize also our colleague Mitch Englander with our SOSLA program that we put out, and one of the instructions, this first time that I heard of a green street was during the Save Our Street SOSLA initiative. So looking forward to moving forward on this. We've been approached by a number of organizations that also called for some policy changes as it relates to Green Street. So it's going to be a great ride, and looking forward to working with you and your committee, and anxious to hear the reports. Thank you.
With that, Mr. Prieto?
Certainly, Mr. Chairs. You have a joint Bureau of Sanitation, Bureau of Engineering, and Bureau of Street Services report in response to the motion Fuentes-Bonin relative to developing the ordinance requiring all public street construction and reconstruction projects to incorporate stormwater management guidelines. You have staff as well as Commissioner Romero to present the matter.
Very good. We welcome our I'll be careful, I don't want to say I've got favorites. Our good Commissioner, Barbara Romero. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this presentation. It is, and Councilman Fuentes, thank you for your leadership on this motion. It's very exciting for us to start looking at our new framework. I think as working with the bureaus on re-examining the way we assess how we do construction of our streets is a critical piece, and during the discussions, what I learned is unless we hold ourselves to the same, unless it's a requirement, we're not going to do things differently. So I think it's important for us to look at how we need to become more efficient, not only with our water, but our resources. I think we need to examine and have our bureaus look at what is the cost-benefit analysis. And I think because when we were looking at Save Our Streets, we didn't have those numbers available to really see, and we didn't have enough viable examples to compare what are the added value of these kinds of projects. So I'm excited as not only a member of the Water Cabinet, but also the chair of the Green Streets Committee to work with the bureaus and work with you guys to help figure out best practices to how we address this very important issue. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Shram Karagani from LA, Los Angeles Sanitation. I, in conjunction with my colleague from Bureau of Engineering, Mr. Ted Allen, and also Mr. Hugh Lee, we have a brief presentation for you that I'm going to go through. But before I start, I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your leadership on this important motion. As you know, this motion using the streets, which are the most important corridor part of our, transport of stormwater, our mobility, and also helping us in meeting our TMDLs is an important issue. And I want to thank you and also Mr. Busquiano for that. So, but as we get into IT resolve, I should mention that this is the work of the past few years that we have worked within the public works with the departments to go over some of the things we have done. Obviously, all of you know what is a green street. We cannot look at a street historically as just a transport right now. The green street is designed to capture, it is already a part of a stormwater program because we designed the street to carry the rainwater when it rains, but now we have opportunity not only to transport the rain in a safe manner so it would not get flooded, also have opportunity to capture rainwater as a means of greening the street, and that's basically what a green street is as far as using natural system to make the concrete and asphalt, which provide a lot of problems for us to a green corridor. And keep in mind that, by the way, the streets are nothing more than, we are not doing something that that Mother Nature did not do some 200 years ago. All of our streets were basically the pathway of water. It's just that we're human. We put them on pipe. We put the rain on pipe under the streets, and then we asphalt the street right now, make them impervious. So the background, as you know, we have done a lot, again, within the public works under the leadership of, different commissioners, and right now Commissioner Romero. We do have a green street committee that have been meeting for many years right now. These are some of the work that we have done just to show you as far as, in the past. But under this motion that you have introduced, we have opportunity to get much higher to where we have been so far. These are some of the departments that we have been working, not mentioning all of their names. Of course, Green Street, as I mentioned, besides mobility, this is an opportunity for us to improve water quality. The streets and roadways are the most polluted source of, contaminants that we have. As you could imagine, we have some 300 days of the year, asphalt, heat, no rain, and everything collect. And as soon as the rain comes, everything goes without treatment to our catch basin and then to the ocean. So you could see that, we have an opportunity of improving water quality. That's actually mandated by our permit. The city is mandated to improve water quality in our rivers. It augment water supply. We have opportunity in this drought that we have been talking about to actually capture rainwater and let it infiltrate. It provides flood protection. A lot of our street, because of the last time we did infrastructure upgrade for the system was in 1960s and 70s through the bonds, but now we have opportunities to improve the flood protection also. And of course, rainwater harvesting is something everyone wants to do. We have a rain barrel program that there is not a day passes by that people call and they want to get involved. They want to be a part of managing the water, and that's important outreach. And then, of course, for us to import 85% of our water from unsecured places is not a good policy, in my view, for the city when we have both rainwater and recycled water that we could use next to us. These are some of other beneficial uses. We have, of course, open space habitat right now, recreation, healthy communities, improve water quality. These are the side effects of the multi green-blue projects that we are implementing. But these are not discretionary, these are actually mandated in our MS4. So we are doing the good thing, of course, because, under your leadership, because we mean it, but these are also mandated in the permit. So that was the permit we have. The permit is held by my general manager, Mr. Enrique Zaldivar, right now is a permit holder and is the one that signs each year that we are complying, to the United States US EPA. These are the TMDLs, not to bore you with the numbers, but TMDLs, we have TMDLs for all of the 4 watersheds that we have right now. And soon enough, in month of April, I would be before you talking about the plans that we have done for watershed, that, I would come and brief you on what we have done so far. Again, there are a series of guidelines and manuals that we have prepared, and these are some of them that we have, and all of these, by the way, are available on our website. These are some of the standard plans that we worked with Bureau of Engineering, Street Services, Department of Water and Power, and others, nonprofit organizations, to create standards that can be used citywide. Again, a terminology from our permit right now, the requirement is for us to get 85 percentile of every rain event for us to comply with the permit based on the volume over 24 hours, or just treat and release. This is an example of elements of a green street. It is hard for you to see, but just very briefly, it goes over the standards as far as the cost, as far as some of the benefits we get when we have a green street. These are examples right now that I would just go very fast. The first street was the Oris Street right now, that we made it green by using rain garden on this sidewalk. Then we have River there. We have Elmer Avenue that you have heard that we have worked with many nonprofit. South Park also, 11th and Hope. You see, and these are examples before and after. Again, I go through them fast just to see there's a transformation basically of concrete and asphalt to something that people actually want to visit. Elmer before and after. It's the Glen Oaks also before and after. Woodman Avenue, Green Street before and after. North Hollywood, again, having infiltration trenches in the alley before and after. River there, again, showing infiltration and using filters to clean up the water before it goes to LA River. Ed Reyes Park, this is, again, another project.
Park?
I'm sorry, Mr. Ed Reyes Park.
Very good.
This is the park that what we call street end right now. We have 400 street that goes to LA River right now, and all of them are asphalt and taking pollutant. We have opportunity to make them a greenway and let the water cleanse, and people use this as a greenway, like a park atmosphere, and the water is clean before it goes to the LA River. We are daylighting a storm drain here. Old Oaks Road, another one that we have in our Santa Monica watershed, again, another greening. Manchester Neighborhood Greenway project, another project that we have. If you had seen it before, the place was full of trash. Now we are having pavers that water infiltrate, and we have a rain garden next to it that actually you want to visit and you are not afraid just to walk.
Who funded that? Was that Propo?
Yes. Yes, and also some money from SEP project, what we call supplemental environmental. Avalon project, again, 2 other projects that are grant funded from Proposition 84. And this is before, and same goes for Broadway, series of rain gardens and also a detention basin. Other examples that we have also, Fairbank Boulevard street widening. These are what we are going to use, what we call dry wells to inject the water to the ground. Again, Fairbank one right now. Other example, Imperial Highway is another one we have next to our treatment plant. Now we come to the motion right now. So this was something we have done, but the motion provides us the opportunity now to go, really, it is transformational in my view, to go to a higher level right now. Basically, the motion asks us to look at all the opportunities we have when we are constructing basically a street, to see what is the opportunity of us to have green elements. Not every street would be feasible, but we have enough technology right now, enough, what we call GIS layer to find out what is the intersection of the flooding, pollutant, infiltration, porous, all of those things. When they come together, you could actually create a project, and we have a checklist to go through them. So that's what this motion actually provides us right now, as opposed just to asphalt and let go when we don't have enough water. So under, again, your leadership and your staff and everyone else, we have been meeting with CAO, CLA, all the departments that you see over here, and we have been talking about what is it How are we going to implement the motion that you have introduced? As a result of that, the team has agreed that we are going to create, with the help of the city attorney, to draft an ordinance that actually implement the intent of the motion, and then we are going to have a handbook, that easy handbook that everyone can follow, so there won't be any misunderstanding of what needs to be done under different scenarios we have. So that's what we have been doing, and we have a short report that we have provided you. No, these are not sequential, but the handbook, this is the schedule of the ordinance, working with city attorney and going to the outreach of all of our nonprofit organization and everyone. So we have provided opportunity for everyone, because I think this is something that everyone would like to comment, because streets are the areas that we live in right now, and having asphalt and no greening is just doesn't make sense to me, and we would have the handbook that goes along with that one. That would conclude my remark. I would be happy to respond to any comments, questions you may have.
And I have one closing comment. There's two things that are important to highlight, that all these things that we're asking ourselves to evaluate, it's basically within the public right-of-way. Currently, right now, in the private, the low-impact development asks this of private development. So we're already asking, what's included in this report is things it's within the public right-of-way that is looking at our public projects, whether we're doing them or where we have a public and private entity doing projects within the public right-of-way. So that's a really important thing to highlight, that we're basically looking and evaluating ourselves to make sure that if there's any way we can increase the amount of green streets by just saying, is it feasible? I think we hope that would increase the amount of green streets that we produce in the city of Los, in the public right-of-way. So thank you very much, and we're here for any questions.
Great. Any other presentations or comments from folks?
I would this is Ted Allen, Deputy City Engineer for Bureau of Engineering. I would like to add that, the work with the three bureaus, you can see in the example projects, all three of us have, and the Board of Public Works for sure, quite a lot of leadership in this area, have done quite a few projects over the last almost a decade now. And so these rules and the proposed guidelines will be based on experience with these sample projects. And as Commissioner Romero said, we wouldn't be asking others to do something that we're not doing on our own projects. So under the Board of Public Works Green Street policy, we've been implementing these wherever we had funding in the past. So this will kind of take it to a next level of making it mandatory.
And also, Hugh Lee from the Bureau of Street Services, also echoing the same comments. Over the years, there are occasional encounters that one of the city bureaus will have with a nonprofit or another agency that says, "Hey, I've got a great idea for the city. Can we apply for a grant to do something?" So, the bureaus have had some experience doing some of these, but this seems to take it to the next level where it becomes really the mainstay of what the city should choose to do in the future. So just looking forward to continue to work with everybody, develop these guidelines so that we can move forward.
Very good. Well, I think it's really important to continue sort of highlighting what it is that the city has been doing. I mean, we really should celebrate all of our previous successes. I think the Green Streets sort of pilot program essentially is what it was, where we could find funding and implement some best management practices, was very, very good. The low-impact design ordinance, I think, also phenomenal in making it so that we were moving multifamily projects into a place where we're catching on-site solutions. And I think, to your point, I think this really is sort of part of the evolution, because I think we really ought to endeavor with every single dollar, with every single capital expenditure that is made, to put that policy filter in place so that we maximize the opportunity when it comes to water. And I think whether it's the recycling, the recapturing, the infiltration, the mandates under the MS4 compliance, irrespective of what type of water, we should recognize that it has a real value and that we need to maximize it. And I think that if this ordinance, if it were to be approved and move forward, will provide the city, I think, with that coordination, and hopefully will unbundle the dollars so that we don't do it as a pilot and we don't do it as a subject to special bond funding, but we do it as a matter of course. And I think that is it's exactly where I'd like to see us all move to. And I will say again, Mr. Buscaino, that honestly, this idea, at least in trying to formalize this approach, really came out of SOS LA. The work that Mr. Englander and you all did, I think, was very, very helpful in, I think, illuminating the need for us to really pivot to a place that we are maximizing the opportunity every single time a dollar or a shovel is used in the city of Los Angeles. And I think this is really a tremendous opportunity. I do want to have staff spend a little bit of time talking about the last instruction here about beginning to do the research on formalizing an in lieu fee, because I think what is important here is that we will begin to do all of this as a matter of course as soon as we move forward on this. But I think it's also important for us to recognize that not every area of the city of Los Angeles will necessarily have the opportunity for any of the things that this ordinance would make it so that we'd have to do. What do we do in those instances? Tell us a little bit about the idea there with the fee.
Thank you very much. I start, and of course my colleagues could add. Councilmember, as you mentioned, that not every property or not every street can afford the opportunity of having green elements. So what we could provide, we could create what we call an in lieu fee. In lieu fee is a terminology that for the folks in the same watershed I'm talking about, the same sub-watershed that cannot implement green elements, they could provide some funding, and we would have a cost formula toward some kind of fund that they put their money. So as everyone put their money, we create a regional project or another project in the same watershed to deal with the same pollutant that developer of that street could not do. So there is within California Constitution, there are a series of things we need to do for in lieu fee, but we could provide all of that, and we could report back as a part of our handbook to you how that in lieu fee works.
Very good. I think that's going to be really important. And I know that this handbook really applies, at least at this stage, to the public right-of-way. And I think a lot of us have different interpretations as to what that means. What is it that we're talking about when we say the right-of-way? And how will these projects, how do we currently administer those types of projects in the right-of-way, and how will this impact your interpretation of right-of-way?
Yeah, currently what's defined as the public right-of-way is actually the back of the sidewalk to the back of the sidewalk and across the other street. So it includes the sidewalks, the curbs, gutters, and the street itself. Currently, any work that's done in the public right-of-way is overseen by the Bureau of Engineering's permit section. So that's the current clearinghouse for controlling developments from the private sector. On top of projects proposed by the private sector, there's also projects that the bureaus do on their own by initiating projects. Then that's done through the close cooperation with the Board of Public Works, and basically is defined as our capital improvement programs. So.
Yeah, every property that has a street or even an alley behind it, a street to the side of it, wherever there's the property line that we think of. Technically, the property line can be seen as going to the center line of the street, but there's a dedication of a public right-of-way easement. So what we usually refer to as private property is everything up to that property line at the boundary of the easement. So wherever, and it can vary on a street. Some parcels may have dedicated more easement because they developed at different points in time, but technically what's public right-of-way is wherever that dedicated easement for public right-of-way starts. So anything on the private property side is under the building and safety planning permit process, and that's where the low impact development, the LID ordinance, applies. So this will capture everything else, so then everything would be covered.
That is music to my ears. I didn't say it at the outset, but and I'll pass it on to Mr. Buscaino now, but I absolutely appreciate everything that you all have done to move this item forward. I mean, I think one of you all said it, and I've said it privately in meetings, that we really do have to start looking at the public right-of-way as our chief conveyance of water system. We can't just subscribe to the old way of thinking where we canal and move water and then discharge it. We've got to figure out how to capture, how to infiltrate, how to turn every single molecule over as many times as possible. And I learned that most recently, I think, with everything that we've been doing here. But there are examples across the world, really, where folks are really becoming more water literate, really understanding the value, and as we are in our hottest period in global history and driest in the city of Los Angeles and now warmest, it just becomes, I think, not only incredibly important that we do it as a matter of our business here, but for the ratepayer, this is going to be really important too. Any opportunity that we get to maximize that molecule of water and turn it several times over is going to be just incredibly important. Mr. Buscaino.
Thank you, Mr. Fuentes. Thanks so much for the report. Very comprehensive. Really appreciate it. And there's going to be a lot of hands on deck. A lot of bureaus are going to be involved here. What responsibilities under this ordinance will each bureau have to meet the objectives? And secondly, do you anticipate the role of each bureau to be clearly laid out so that there's no overlap and not want to make sure one hand's talking to another?
Just a few words, and then my colleagues. As you know, I mentioned that, the Bureau of Sanitation, we are the permit holder of the MS4, so that's within my job description to make sure that we have everything, we would maximize every opportunity. But as a part of the handbook, we would identify the roles of all of the bureaus. We currently have a process, what we call for publics, that, as my colleague, Mr. Allen, mentioned. For the private side, we have a public counter. People come and get their plan checked. This is, of course, for public right-of-way, and all of the roles and responsibilities would identify that which bureau would do what when it comes to the public right-of-way in the handbook.
Yeah, we've left, some of the details are yet to be developed, but we do want to not require extra permits. So we still see the permit would be through the Bureau of Engineering permit that would already be the trigger. In the case of private developers, if it's another city department, then they would also usually be pulling a permit from BUE. But behind the scenes, who's doing what check is a little bit up in the air still. We'll work out the details, but the goal is to make it as straightforward as possible, to not add layers of a lot of extra plan check time or anything like that, to try to streamline it.
That's music to my ears.
I think what's also very important, and what I saw during the discussions that we had in developing the report, was that it should be, who should be accountable is that all the bureaus should be accountable, because what's happening is then there's silos of whose responsibility it is. So if it's street services responsible for the streets and they're just asphalting, how do we integrate all the solutions together to have the multiple benefits, so then we could tap into money like cap and trade? So when we're looking at resurfacing our streets, how do we become eligible to designing streets for the future? So I think that was an important thing for me, is that that Ted and that we're all here sitting, that it's the MS permit is not just the burden of sanitation, it's a burden of the city.
Right.
So how do the bureaus all play a role in that integration? So I think that is something we definitely need to figure out how to become more efficient.
Thanks, Commissioner, for that. And it's just on the Save Our Streets, on the SOSLA initiative, that, by the way, it's not dead. It's still alive and well.
We're hoping it.
We're working in our committee on this Street Smart initiative that we proposed in response to the SOSLA. And we had the $4 billion price tag to fix every failed street in the city of Los Angeles. And how are these requirements before us going to impact the overall cost of a reconstruction?
I think it could increase it, but it also can reduce it, and that's why I think that looking at the cost-benefit analysis is going to be an important, because it might cost us a little more to build one of these streets, but it might save us in other ways. So I think.
Remember, Elmer was a huge price tag.
And that, exactly, and I think that is a great project, but I think it's a poor example of, we don't need to do, they did basically the Cadillac version, whistles, we could do a Prius. And based on the site conditions, we should be looking at not having to do, I think the important part is that we weren't even evaluating whether we should look at integrating green streets into the projects. And as a former person working on projects, unless you have the money up front, and it's a requirement, then it's hard to add on. So as you're raising money, but if it's designed into some of these projects, they might not be moved forward until you get the additional money, but then it's integrated into the project when money does become available. So I think changing the spectrum, how we look at these, as engineers, they're designing for certain principles, but if we add to the principles, then they can integrate that. So I think it's something that we need to look at. And really have hard numbers of the added value and benefits, because it might, it is going to increase it.
Especially with every effort we're making here to conserve water, what role is DWP going to have in this?
They have been involved in our working group for sure, and they're involved a lot in the certain regional projects where they're really great candidates for a large volume of infiltration in the drinking water basin. You know, not all parts of the city have usable groundwater for drinking water. I should have said groundwater basin, but I wanted to point out also some of the pilot projects did have pretty large price tags, but some of those were kind of sub-regional projects. They weren't just taking the water from their own little tributary area. Those projects were sometimes taking water from many, many blocks and infiltrating it. So they were kind of the larger scale. And I think moving forward, there are still areas where those types of projects make sense, and that's where the fee in lieu for those projects that are really in bad candidate areas may be used for those regional projects. But I think that the average project under this program, we see it more as doing smaller scale improvements that would, you know, attempt to mitigate the water just in that tributary area for the most part. So it wouldn't be that large a cost impact like those pilot projects.
I just want to add one sentence. I would say the cost would go down this way right now if you look at it as an integrated way of looking. So we are only looking at the street cost right now, but if you look at the street cost, the water that we capture, the MS4 that we comply, the rainwater, the infiltration, if you look at all of those costs over the life cycle of, I would say the price should go down drastically in my view, and the incremental price of adding the green elements, based on my experience within the city right now, we're talking about 5 to 10%. We're not talking about huge, as long as we do the integration up front and we look at it over a long period.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Yeah, in fact, that dovetails nicely into the question I was going to ask. But up front, I want to say I'm really excited about this. This is a great motion, exactly where the city needs to be, and it's wonderful. The question about cost-benefit analysis and how we build that into this is very important, because there's always this tension about how many streets we can pave versus how green we want the streets to be. And of course, we all want both. We want to pave all the streets and we want them to be super green. It seems like the in lieu fee is the key to the cost-benefit, equation, in that whatever you set that fee at will be the ceiling for many projects in terms of the additional price. If you're looking at a street and it's going to cost 40% more, then you're probably going to look at the in lieu fee if it's a 5% fee. Is that a safe assumption? Is the in lieu fee sort of the cap for the increase in terms of price, and then everything, whatever you get below that is?
I would say it provide us another, off-ramp off of the freeway, using that analogy, because we look at site-specific issues. If there is opportunity for us to have green elements, yes, and we have to cost it so that the cost has to be proportionate to actual cost that we have, because we have series of proposition within our Constitution, Prop 218 and others, that the cost of in lieu fee has to be very proportionate to what we were supposed to spend in order to create that green element for that specific street. That's what they would pay. Again, what the fee would be, I don't know right now, but that would be a part of our analysis as we move forward.
Yeah, I think part of the analysis, and this is what we hope to do as we get into our committees to develop the actual guidelines in the handbook, is there actually may be situations where a street is so perfectly located that it has the correct type of soils, it carries the correct amount of water, where it actually may be worthwhile spending a lot of money on that street because of the value it brings. And then there's other streets that are much lower, quote-unquote, targets, where I'm saying that it may be just to accept the in lieu fee ceiling. So I think the main gist of all this is that thought process is going to start where we're going to try to identify where those are, to see where all the thinking and all the effort should go to get the most productive project out of it.
I mean, the cost-benefit analysis in the example you gave would be very high on the benefit side, so you would clearly move forward. On a street where it's maybe not quite as high proportionally, that's where the in lieu fee would
probably be your
cap.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great.
And on that point, I just want to make sure that folks are sort of, when we're talking about costs, that we're doing a true accounting. I think what makes all of this very difficult is that we have an MS4 compliance mandate that isn't subsumed in the budgets for repaving or sidewalk repair and that sort of thing. But if it was to stand alone, it's an $8 billion cost to deal with MS4, and that's not accounted for when we're out there doing repaving. There's additional cost for water supply that isn't accounted for when we import more water into Los Angeles. And so the idea here is the cost benefit has to include all of that, which is really tough to do because we would have to have a real networked way of looking at all of this so that you can have some true accounting. Because ultimately, colleagues, it's going to come out of our pockets. It's either going to be through AB 2403, it's going to be through MS4 compliance fees, it's going to be through increased water prices. I mean, the point is, how do you aggregate all of the true costs and maximize the opportunity on a site-by-site basis so that we minimize the impact to the ratepayer, and I think equally, and maybe even more important, we maximize the opportunity to capture, treat, store water. And that is, I want to make sure that we're not thinking about it just in terms of more expense immediately from a budgetary perspective. You have to account for all the other things that are outside of our budget that are, I think, very costly to all of us, and they're in different places. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just express my support for this motion, and I appreciate the leadership of both chairs and the city. It's refreshing to see the collaboration, amongst a variety of agencies, departments, and stakeholders. I had a real interest in the Avalon Alley Greenway demonstration project, which is, I think, just getting started. Because my district has probably the largest network of alleys in the city, almost 250 miles, I think. Talk a little bit about any differences in doing alleys. I know that this particular project got a lot of good community support. There's a lot of involvement, a lot of engagement. You almost get 2 for 1 when you're doing the alley because you get the neighbors on both sides that agree to it. But any special challenges with alleys?
Not really, Councilman, but it is really when the grants come, the water bond through grants come, we read the requirements and see which of our projects that we have matches. Our ultimate goal is that to make sure every alley, in my view, because it helps us, as Councilman and Mr. Chair mentioned, that it helps us on so many fronts. We didn't discuss the claims, fraud claims and other things. So our plan is that to make, after Avalon, to make every alley in the city based on the funding that we have green. So it is basically water bond requirements and which alley matches for us to maximize receiving that grant.
I would add that from the Bureau of Engineering perspective, there is one major difference in that, we have standard plans that have been approved now for using permeable pavers, which are often used either for the entire alley or just a trench in the middle to help the water infiltrate. We can't use those in the main roadway because of the heavy traffic and buses and things like that. So there are more options available in the alleyway, and you've got the entire width to work with instead of usually we're just in the parkway on the street side.
Well, I certainly would encourage the development of as many alleys as possible in this process because it does add to the overall, I think, benefit of the community. And as I said, at least with this pilot effort, it provided some real good community building as neighbors had to work together to agree, coming up with plans and figuring out how it's going to really benefit the individual uses.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. LaBonge.
Thank you. Any of you at the table read the Wall Street Journal on December 15th, 2014?
Not that issue, Councilman.
Anyway, it has Los Angeles considers way to collect waters.
Oh, yeah.
Enrique Saldivar, the dashing general manager of the Bureau of Sanitation. On and on it says. And it just talks about, and Marty Adams is quoted from Water and Power, if we could catch every drop, it would make a big difference. The biggest drop that I see is in the Los Angeles River. And I know, let's say if we're all people of the city in this room right here, we got to talk to all of us got to agree. If we're in the alley, we got to deal with everything. Where are you on the biggest, where you get the biggest bang? And the biggest bang so far has been, I believe, a successful effort. And I thank Ruth Galanter because she put her effort into it as well. The former councilwoman, was the new parking at the zoo. Have you been familiar with that? Have you seen it?
Yes, the Prop O project, Councilmember.
The what?
The Proposition O.
Project, yeah. What do you think of that?
I believe it was a good pilot project we did. We did 1/3, it's about 33 acres. We did 1/3 of it, about 12 acres of using, pervious, pavers. And if you actually use the hose on during the dry weather, you see how fast the water infiltrate, and we have series of planters that captures all of the polluted runoff off of the asphalt.
Yeah, my question, the members of the committee, is there large areas, and you mentioned the large on Slauson, is it on Slauson, the new wetlands on Slauson? And the large areas, if you go to large areas first where you do better bang for your buck. I see the ratepayer advocate, he always likes a better bang for a buck. And so I'm just asking that, is that one concept here? Because I really think if we look at, and everybody in the Los Angeles River, you know, would like to green it, I do believe some of the banks are going to be concrete, but if in the area that I represent, because of the water table, the bottom of the river is not, it's natural, so that's a positive. This is from the Glendale Narrows by Traveltown all the way down through Mr. O'Farrell's and Mr. Cedilla's district down through Elysian Valley to Lincoln Heights. So I'm into bigger now, and not just to do a little here and there. I know it's not going to be done in 17 weeks, but I know I want to make those comments going out the door. And I just wanted to ask if you identified this in what are some big things? Like, let's say there's redevelopment over the next several years at the Memorial Coliseum, and as the Coliseum Commissioner Curran Prices know, the partnership and collaboration with USC, things are going to happen. Do we look at these large areas and say we should try to assist and attack those? That's my question, Ms. Romero.
I think from my understanding, Bureau of Sanitation is doing their enhanced watershed management planning as we speak, which is looking at larger sites throughout the watersheds, and then DWP is also doing their stormwater capture planning efforts as we speak. So those are looking at bigger sites and also distributed sites. I think this motion is not saying we don't look at this, but this is trying to capture the areas of our streets, of our public right-of-way that currently we're missing the opportunity to integrate. So it's not precluding that, but it's looking at and adding to it.
Very well. The last thing I would like to say, ADA is very important to all of us now, and sometimes I've noticed in the transformation of parkways, it does, I believe, inhibit people if they have special needs and ADA. And also, and is there a city attorney here? Mr. Jordan here? Mr. Jordan was here. John, good John. There's a situation where the growth of plants in the parkway, sometimes at an intersection, does cause the visibility triangle to be an alarming thing. Have you thought about that at all? And you could say no if you haven't.
No, we do. The Bureau of Engineering, I know some people don't like us sometimes because we look at those things, but it is important as a city to make sure that, you know, access is preserved for people and safety as well. So we have adopted some Green Street standard plans that incorporate both concerns, and we continue to look at new things, but we don't do things lightly. We do...
if you go to Talmadge and Clarissa in the Franklin Hills, East Hollywood, Los Feliz area, there's a high growth in the parkway. I go to Talmadge and Prospect, right where ABC Studios is. My fear is when infants and young children learn to walk, they love to walk, and they get maybe ahead of their family, and they get to the intersection, and boom, there's the visibility triangle is blocked. So I would like you to look at that issue as it relates to ADA and also for safety. And you know what the visibility triangle is?
Yes, sir.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Labange, there are residential parkway guidelines that you can find on the Tree People website or
Street Services.
And
I just want the city attorney, Mr. Chairman, because I do believe sometimes we go, you know, Steve Lopez wrote a little story about this. Remember that? And that kind of got the ball growing on all this stuff. People in parkway planning, I got that.
Yeah.
So, but I just want to make sure for safety issues that we, and then maybe you have to, I don't like to use this term, put an X at intersections. I don't know. Because what will happen is someone will say it may have been unsafe because there was growth higher than 3 feet on that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Labange.
And the junior chair, too.
Mr. Peretz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to commend both of our chairs for all their great work on what is really a terrific policy, as well as our departments and both of your staffs. This is really going to have a huge impact, I think, on the future of the city. And as Chairman Fuentes mentioned, we have an $8 billion stormwater responsibility. I don't know if we've ever budgeted for it anywhere, really, and I mention it at every opportunity because I don't want us to forget it. And I don't know if you have a sense yet of how much of a positive impact that will have on this, but it seems like that issue alone might allow this project to pay for itself if we actually acknowledge that we have to somehow deal with that $8 billion requirement upon us. What do we think this will do in terms of resolving that?
Councilmember, as I mentioned before, most of the pollutants are created off of the roadway. This is a great opportunity. I don't have a percentage, but I could tell you, Commissioner, when she was mentioning we are creating watershed-wide plans, those plans not only have big project regional distributed, they are going to have every street in the city prioritized based on the GIS layers that I mentioned to you, is going to have tremendous impact. I don't have it in percentage-wise right now, but opportunity of greening all of our streets that are source of pollutant in the first place, it would be going, I cannot say how important impact this is going to have on that $8 billion that you have mentioned, citywide right now.
And because of that, are we considering the possibility of prioritizing the many streets that we have to repair by repairing the ones where this could be most advantageous?
The answer is yes. When I come before you in April, I have every street in all of the 4 watersheds prioritized based on the things that I mentioned: pollutant, flooding, opportunity, pervious area. There is a number of standards that you would hear from us when we present that to you in April.
And have we looked at partnering with some entities that could help us, like LA County or the Army Corps of Engineers or the Bureau of Reclamation, that might help us not only implement this but also fund it?
Yes, but I said watershed-wise, we are not only discharging the watershed, so I'm working with almost 26 agency municipalities within the 4 watershed, Councilmember. So there are all LA counties involved, Corps of Engineers. There is no one in the watershed that we don't work with because they are part of our team, because we're creating watershed-wide plans.
And you should know that the LA caucus of Metropolitan Water District, which I'm part of, is working to get stormwater added hopefully soon to their local resources program funding. And so if it's timely enough to connect with this, hopefully we can get Met to help do some of the funding of these projects.
Absolutely. We have our applications ready, sir. Yes. Thank you.
And just 2 other thoughts. One, I love the idea of doing more alleys, because I think my constituents call up and say our alleys look like third world countries, and I think they're exaggerating, and you actually go out to look at the alleys and they look like they belong in third world countries, because they look like landmines have gone off in them. So if we could take some of our terrible alleys and instead use this as an opportunity to fix them and implement this program, I think that's definitely a win-win.
I agree, absolutely, sir.
And one last point, although it's probably ever so slightly off topic. I see we have all of these different projects that are completed or underway. Any reason why the West Side Greenway project next to the Expo line has struggled so much to get funded?
Councilman, really the only issue was that working with this high-speed authority and MTA, we had so many meetings with them, and we could not convince them that, as a part of their project, which is going to have impact on the environment, they should mitigate this project. So right as it is right now, I am marketing that project against all the grants that I know. I'm a member of Airbnb and other grant opportunity that I'm asking for, and hopefully if there is any money from Prop O savings, it is also in queue for that Prop O as well.
Thank you.
Very good. Colleagues, any additional questions, comments, or concerns?
Just want to know how the East Valley Water Reclamation Project is going. I was out at Sepulveda Basin with my wife riding our bikes, and I remember that project. Is it still happening?
Are you referring to recycling project at Tillman, Councilman?
Yes.
Yes, that project, we are working closely with Water and Power. and we are hoping to have 35 MGD recycled water, which everyone around the nation doesn't know to go to our spreading ground.
Right.
So we could use that
Our
water.
spreading ground up by the Bacomo Wash?
Yes. And
Very good.
Yes.
Yeah. You should have a sign on the back of your trucks, all water is recycled, right?
Yes.
Because they don't manufacture it anywhere. It's all natural, recycled, correct?
Yes, I fully agree, sir, yes.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Very good. Colleagues, seeing and hearing no additional questions or comments, let's go ahead and take public comment on, or comments on this item. If Melanie Winter, Peter Schellenbarger, and Deborah Bloom and Liz Crossan can make their way to the table.
Hey, man.
Ms. Bloom, how are you? Feel free to begin.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Weinstein Bloom. I'm the Director of Policy at Tree People. Nice to see you all, and thank you for having this as a joint committee session. I'm very pleased to be here because this is a very critical issue, and I also want to thank Councilman Fuentes for his leadership on this. Very important. So why is this so important? It's because our streets have become our urban rivers, essentially. And as you all know, and you've seen from the presentation from Sharam, we've urbanized almost everything. So everything is now rooted towards our streets and picking up pollutants, fouling the LA River, and eventually the ocean. The reason this motion is critical, and it's actually a concept that Tree People's been espousing for a while, and we're so happy to support it, is because it starts to reverse this. And I love the quote from Sharam. You know, he talked about streets being designed to move rain originally. Well, if that was part of the point, then why can't we redesign them to capture this water as well? You know there are multiple benefits from this. I won't go into them, including water supply, water pollution reduction, as well as flooding reduction. But I will say that Tree People and many of our partners, several of them are at this table, have submitted a letter with specific comments, mostly addressing the agency report. But a couple comments about it is that we do think that the 85th percentile should be a minimum, not a maximum for capture. And that should look upstream as well. Let's try to combine LID with the public right-of-way, because it should look upstream. If the parcels upstream are capturing water, perhaps the load on the streets below to capture would be less and reducing the costs. And I'd like to leave you lastly with the following fact from the Stormwater Capture Master Plan. It shows, modeling shows that captured rainfall could equate to between 30 to 45% of LA's current water demand. That's 30 to 45% of LA's current water demand. And infrastructure is a big part, changing infrastructure is a big part of getting there. So streets are infrastructure, so let's move forward.
Great, thank you. Liz?
Good afternoon. My name is Liz Crossan. I'm the Executive Director of Los Angeles Waterkeeper. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Obviously, stormwater is a big concern. It's something that LA Waterkeeper is intimately involved in, working on both the regulatory side and the enforcement side. And one thing I do want to point out, Sharam mentioned it well, is the MS4 permit is real and here, and in fact is something that is not being complied with currently. So it's not sort of a future threat of the $8 billion that could be imposed, $37,000 per day per violation, but it's actually currently permittees are not in compliance with the MS4 permit, which means that all of our waterways, the LA River, the San Gabriel, Ballona Creek, they're all out of compliance and not supporting the uses that they are supposed to support under the Clean Water Act. So I do see this opportunity as a prime example of something we should do right away. I support the motion overall. We have signed on to a coalition letter that Deborah mentioned under the banner of Green LA. And there are just a few points I wanted to make that are somewhat mentioned in that letter. And first of all, I really want to make sure that we're talking about construction, reconstruction, and resurfacing, that we really take advantage of every single opportunity we can to look for the Green Street elements that we can implement. Secondly, this idea of having a minimum, and this is something that the MS4 permit also contemplates, is this 85th percentile. So projects should be at least 85th percentile, and wherever possible should be more. And to not comply with that 85th percentile, a street project or a permittee under the MS4 permit should have to show that it's infeasible to do so. So it should actually be a minimum. And lastly, public input is critically important. We do commend Councilmember Fuentes and his staff for including us in the conversation and including Green LA, and we would like to be involved in the development of the ordinance, in the handbook, and we really think that that's a critical part of this whole process. So thank you.
Timing, Liz. That was awesome. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'm Melanie Winter. I'm the founder and director of the River Project. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in discussion of this really critical action of addressing our streets. And as has been mentioned, our streets were designed as our channels and our rivers were to move water away from here as quickly as possible. And as we are aware, that's not something we can support moving forward, either in the river or in our streets. It does not serve our interests in the 21st century. We're facing not only MS4 permit issues, but also drought, which will continue to some degree and to something we've never seen, most likely through this century. To address those things together, water supply, climate resilience, water quality, and flooding, is an opportunity that we're presented with here in a really wonderfully timely way. The integration between departments in how we address this and the opportunity to move past the siloing and responsibilities and collaboration with this is tremendous, and I hope that as we move forward in the development of the handbook, we remain mindful of the divisions between departments but may not serve us moving forward and how to work through that. We are embarking on a reverse engineering to a degree of the city, from the streets to private parcels, and building and safety rules impact that as well. We do have to look at not only the public right-of-way, but where that connects in a distributed way to private parcels and how those things relate to each other. If we're going to do well and thrive as a city, water is critical. Hanging on to it, as the council member has said, every molecule needs to be forefront in all of our planning and all of our thinking in the next decade. So I thank you very much for this. This is a great step forward. We look forward to working with the GIS data to address some of the questions raised by the board here today, so that we do them in the right places and we reduce carbon in the process, and we look at a range of size of projects. There is no silver bullet. Big projects aren't going to help us alone. We have to do small, medium, and large, and this allows us to get there. Thank you.
Ms. Winter. If you all would make room for Drew Reddy so he can come up, and we'll hear now from Peter.
Good afternoon, council members. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Peter Schellenberger. I'm the Science and Policy Analyst at Heal the Bay. And on behalf of Heal the Bay, I'm here to express our support of the motion and really emphasize the need for this shift in how the city manages stormwater resources across all bureaus. Incorporating stormwater management requirements into all public right-of-ways has the potential to provide so many benefits, and I mean water quality, water supply, flood, aesthetic benefits. I mean, they're all there. Approximately a third of all our land uses in the city are impervious, and as everyone has identified, our streets are really the systems that convey the stormwater and the pollutants that are collecting on these impervious surfaces. So it's really essential that we manage them as close to the source as possible. So if we could do that on the street level, is so critical. Incorporating the stormwater management techniques is really going to improve local water quality, as well as water supply and flood benefits. You guys are all aware that we have the MS4 permit and the watershed management plans in these MS4 permits, and it's going to cost the city billions of dollars to implement these programs. And green infrastructure is a huge component and a tool that is being used to manage stormwater. So it's really critical for the success of these programs to collaborate and have cost sharing across the bureaus to implement stormwater management in the public right-of-way. Thanks for this opportunity. I just want to express our support of this motion.
Great. Good afternoon, Council and committee members. Drew Reedy, Program Manager at the Council for Watershed Health. We support the Green Sustainable Streets recommendations before you today. 8 years ago, the council worked with partners, including the bureaus in this room and Department of Water and Power, to implement the final phase of our water augmentation study, a study that concluded we can safely and significantly augment our groundwater with stormwater. The result is Elmer Avenue, the Green Street mentioned earlier. We don't consider it a Cadillac, more of a Tesla. It's a shining example of what can be accomplished when public street construction projects incorporate stormwater management best practices. On Elmer Avenue, perennial flooding problems were solved with, yes, an expensive infiltration basin and expensive private property improvements, but also parkway bioswales and shade trees that now cool this community. And native plants are bringing back the birds and butterflies, bees. We hear it all the time from Elmer Avenue neighbors. Why can't all streets be this clean and green? Speaking of green, Dorothy Green, the founder of the council and another small organization you might have heard of, Heal the Bay,
You know Dorothy?
would be very proud of what's being accomplished with this Green Streets motion. She said it best when she shared, we can meet the future of a growing California if water's used much more efficiently. To do so requires an educated and informed citizenry. There's enough water for our growing population. We can have it all. We just need the political will to make it happen. This motion and these recommendations is the will Dorothy spoke of. The Council for Watershed Health leadership supports Dorothy's vision, and it is on their behalf that I ask you to support this ordinance, the checklist, the handbook, the funding research, all the recommendations before you today. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Those are all the cards that we have on that item. Now we'll vote on the energy and environment side. I don't see an objection to a vote, so it would be unanimous. Mr. Buscaino?
Any objection here? No objection?
It says public comment. Did you want item number 1? Come on up. I'm sorry, Mr.
What's the clerk doing down there? How'd you miss that, Mr. Clerk?
See, don't put down Mr. Clerk. Mr.
Mr.
Levon. All right, very good. Ruth, go ahead.
I'm Ruth Sarnoff, and I was thinking of a resource that I think many of the people here today and their associates would find a good resource to look at green solutions in terms of buildings and weather and clean air and all that. One is a program called E2 Design. It's on linktv.org, and it's you can see it on television if you have satellite television on channel 375, and they have lots of programs that are just on design. I saw a great one on Copenhagen just a few days ago. Many of them are an hour, and they're really cutting edge, and they're from all over the world. Another thing that I was thinking about in the course of this discussion was whether the use of rooftop space for some of the things that I've been watching show roof gardens where when it rains, the water permeates the soil, and then it, of course, evaporates, and it becomes part of the cooling and heating system of the buildings. And where we have so many buildings, I remember when we had the attempt at solarizing buildings many years ago, and it didn't work so well, but I wish we had done it more of the solarizing of public buildings, and maybe these roof gardens, if they're part of projects, and could be given some thought. Also, I hope things will be friendly and improve the quality of life in neighborhoods. And I thank you for your time.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Sarnoff. With that, we'll proceed to a vote. On the energy and environment side, there is no objection?
No objection on the public works side as well.
Very good. So the item is moved.
Can I speak? Can I speak at public comment
No,
or
you
not?
don't, you don't have a card for that.
Well,
Yeah. Thank you very much, though.
Well, we'll give her a card next time.
Well, yeah, we're going to adjourn this meeting, and we will begin the Energy and Environment Committee, and if you'd like to speak there, you can fill out a card.
okay, that's what-
Very good.
We will move to 10:10.
Very good. The Public
I'm going
Works...
to miss some of you, though.
The Public
because-
Works Committee will be moving to room 1060. We're adjourned as a joint special meeting.
Mr. Chair, we'll need about 3 minutes to reset for the next meeting.
Very good. We will begin the Energy and Environment Committee in about 3 minutes.